Hammond City Council will now come to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Clerk, go with roll call.
Markovich.
Here.
Spitali.
Here.
Vanez.
Here.
Kalwinski.
Here.
Ulaki.
Here.
Higgs.
Here.
Emerson.
Here.
Enosa.
Here.
Opinker.
Here. Okay, moving on. We have in our audience Congressman Peter Buskowski, who's going to do a presentation for us. Congressman.
President, thank you very much. President, thank you very much, and do want to thank all of the members of the council. Our clerk is here, Chief Executive Officer is here, for the opportunity to briefly address you relative to the expansion of the South Shore in Northwest Indiana. My preference in the time we have is also to address any questions you may have, any concerns that you may have. I do appreciate the invitation, but as may have been communicated to the council office, I'm Vice Chair of the Congressional Steel Caucus. We have a hearing in Washington tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. and United Airlines waits for no one, so I will unfortunately have to depart at 7. I would begin simply by saying, as a lifelong resident of Northwest Indiana, I look across our area and recognize, with the exception of our weather on occasion, there's no place I'd rather live in the United States. We make more steel in 2 counties than any state in the nation. We have the largest inland oil refinery in the United States of America. Just about every east-west rail line, freight, moves through LaPorte, Porter, and Lake County. Some of my colleagues in the United States Congress would love to have a second interchange in their congressional district. We have cities in our communities that in some instances have 4 interstates. We are on the largest body of fresh water on the planet Earth, and we're in the environs of one of the great city-states of the world, the city of Chicago, whose economy is larger than Sweden's. But despite all of those advantages, I would point out that since 1970, Lake County's population has declined by 9.6%. The median household income for a person living in Lake County, Indiana, has declined since 1970 by 15.25%. And a person living in Lake County today is 43% older than they would have been in 1970. And I attribute that to our children not staying, our children not coming back, and our inability to attract new people and new young people to Northwest Indiana, despite all of our advantages. There's a couple of threads to tie this all together. One is the recapturing of our lakeshore for open public use, as Chicago did more than 100 years ago. The city of Hammond is a leader in that endeavor. In cooperation with the state and federal government, you now have an incredible facility on the north end of the city. It's called Wolf Lake. And not only the recreation it engenders, but the economic it will attract to Hammond, Indiana. But I also believe part of that equation is the expansion of the existing South Shore rail line. You have a great deal of economic vitality in the western, southern, and northern communities in the state of Illinois around that city-state of Chicago. They also have well in excess of more than 400 miles of mass transit line. In Indiana, we have 38. 38 that go to Michigan City, and obviously we're aware that the line extends itself to South Bend as well. The city of Chicago has a goal that by the year 2040, they want 75% of their residents to live within walking distance of mass transit, bus or train. And in a sense, you think about the rail station in Chicago and you think about O'Hare. You could live in the city of Chicago and walk to any place in the world. We need to connect ourselves to that transit system so we can say the same for citizens in Northwest Indiana and to grow our economy. I've told audiences repeatedly that our nation has grown in population by more than 50% since 1970. Our population has declined by 9.6%. You have to work hard every day to suppress population growth like that, and we need to grow jobs, and we need to grow our economy. The fact is, no taxes have to be raised. And from my perspective, what we really need to do is to return some of the taxes we're sending to Washington, D.C. every day. The proposed extension to Dyer, and ultimately I certainly believe that the rail line should be expanded to Lowell as well as to Valparaiso, will cost somewhere between about $571 to $615 million. That is not an inconsequential investment, but it also is an investment that will still be in existence in places like Hammond, in Munster, and Lowell, and Hobart 100 years from now. Half of the funds would be a match from the federal government. And every time any of us buy gasoline in this country, we pay a federal gasoline tax, part of which helps other communities build out their mass transit systems. We ought to return some of those monies. There is a commitment by the Regional Development Authority. Not without controversy, the state has committed an additional $4 million to the RDA for this. We need to raise in Lake County $8 million. The county executives, the commissioners, and the council people have enacted a tax as of last year. 0.25, 1/4 of that tax is for economic development. I can't fully appreciate, although we have our budget concerns in Washington, the financial stress you are under and have been under, that have only been exacerbated because of the terrible winter we have had as far as overtime and filling potholes and other services that you need to provide to your citizens. I understand that, but there's two ways to anticipate making sure we have enough revenue to take care of their needs and the next generation's need in Hammond, and that's to invest in our economic infrastructure to grow that tax base. The immediate value, because that income tax is paid into a pot in Lake County, is for it to be distributed for all of the communities for further economic development. And when I stand here today, I take note of the fact that we have been at this endeavor, if you would, for 27 years. And I happily point out it started in this room. It was a member of the Hammond City Council in 1987, Janet Moran, who first proposed that the right-of-way that is now been secured with the cooperation of the city of Hammond be secured for the expansion of mass transit. After the passage of a generation, I can think of no better place in Northwest Indiana to close that loop. I would suggest, because we have a deadline of March 31st for communities to make a decision, that this is the time to act as you and the administration make a decision as to the commitment and allocation of those new tax revenues. I told people sacrifice is that of Brendan Morocco, who lost all 4 limbs in Iraq serving in the United States Army. That's sacrifice. There's no question you're pinched financially, but the question before you is an allocation of resources. With the deadline looming and communities making commitments, Snyder, Indiana, population 277, as far away as you can get from the South Shore and still be in Lake County, is making a commitment tonight. Is, as Winston Churchill said after the Battle of El Alamein, now is not the end of this endeavor. It is not even the beginning of the end, but perhaps Hammond could lead us to the end of the beginning and begin this important endeavor. And with that, again, Mr. President, I appreciate the opportunity and would avail myself of any questions or comments you have.
Thank you, Congressman.
Mr. President,
Councilman.
at your efforts in regards to addressing the needs of the region. Certainly, I would like to have at least a feasibility study as to how much revenue would be needed to fund this project as it relates to Hammond. You say Snyder, who has a population of 277, has committed to this endeavor, but how will the other communities that have not signed off, how will it affect them, and how much money will be needed to make this become a reality is my question.
Councilman, I have that, and I. Essentially, the total investment for $615 million. Construction would start no later than 2020, and the first train would run by 2023. The importance I attach to beginning now, because for those seventh graders in Hammond, they'll be getting out of college in 9 years. As far as the financing of the bond issue, again, we're looking for half the money to be matched by the federal government. We have the commitment by the Regional Development Authority as well as the state commitment and the local match, if you would, from the 20 entities in Lake County, counting the county of Lake County, is $8 million. The new tax that has been implemented for that 0.25 of economic development totals for the first year about $24 million. And so the request as far as the consideration is 1/3 of that for $8 million. It's anticipated that would be able to finance that bond issue for 30 years. I'd be happy to reiterate for you the communities that have committed to date.
Would you please?
I would. First of all, Lake County has committed. Highland has committed. Hobart has committed. Lake Station has committed. Munster has committed. Whiting has committed. Snyder is at 7 p.m. tonight going to commit. Would also point out that I've had many positive conversations, but I think as you can respect, until you act, the city of Hammond acts, it's not for me to make a representation any further.
And in saying that, Congressman Viscoski, why is
Hammond is vital for several reasons. One, it is part of our region. I think every person in this room is proud to be a citizen of Hammond and all the good things it represents. So one, we're in this together. That's why Lake Station, who doesn't have any train tracks, and as far east of Hammond as you can get and still be in Lake County. And that's why Snyder, as far south as you can get in Lake County and be from Hammond, is for this. But I also think you will see exponential growth economically in this particular community. Because young people in particular, the people you want to keep here and to attract to move to Hammond, are looking for transit. The statistic is 16-year-olds to 34-year-olds drove 23% fewer miles in 2009 than they did in 2001. They want access to that transit. And I also think, although that first train will not run until '09, and I want to tell you, the reason I am so adamant about us making a decision and proceeding is not just a passage of time. It's jobs, and it's to compress that 9 years, and maybe it should be 8 years. But I'm convinced next month, when the economic community here and in Chicago knows that there's going to be a train there, stuff's going to start happening for the positive in Hammond.
Well, in saying that, it's available to clean the property up and get some developers there and build it and make it feasible to the community. For whatever reason, it hasn't happened. And I don't know what else I can do but keep beating my head against the wall and saying, we need this. But certainly, I mean, you know, we want to attract more people to Hammond. We certainly want the ones that are here to stay. And what is it, we need to question ourselves is, what is it gonna take to make sure people stay in Hammond? That's a good question.
Mr. Sorry,
Councilman
I didn't
Patelli.
mean to interrupt.
Oh, sorry, Jen, you say?
Oh,
Go right ahead.
sorry, go
No,
ahead.
go ahead, please.
Okay.
Councilman Vines.
Alrighty, thank you. Hi, Congressman, thank you so much for coming this evening. I understand the benefits of economic development. As a person who worked downtown for Chicago for 20 years and took the train for 20 years, I understand the benefits of having a walking community surrounding the train stations. I have not seen yet how many train stations there are going to be in Hammond. Back a couple of years ago, there was some talk about 2. Now I haven't heard anything specific about the number of train stations that are coming here. I feel a key component of this plan is missing, and that is buses. We in Hammond have not had buses for a couple of years now, and we are in great need of buses. I believe that a lot of our residents would be able to take advantage of taking the bus to the train station. I've not heard anything about that. As I said, I'm all in favor of economic development. I think the chances are pretty good that I will not see this entire project come to fruition, but I have, 20 years, but I have grandchildren. I have grandchildren who would be able to take benefit of such a project. It is a huge commitment on the part of Hammond, and we have needs here in Hammond. I understand the whole thinking regionally and all that kind of stuff, but quite frankly, Congressman, we have difficulty getting businesses to come to Hammond now. They're going south. How is this going to bring businesses to Hammond? How is it going to bring new residents to Hammond? How is it going to benefit us without taking from the money that we have, that we were hoping to dedicate to our infrastructure and our economic development, and now this project is here. It's a huge commitment. It's a huge commitment.
It is a One is the Regional Development Authority was created in 2005. And despite criticism officials take throughout Northwest Indiana, all of us, every member of the Northwest Indiana delegation in both houses of both parties supported that. And there are 4 express tasks for the RDA. One is the airport, one is buses, one is the South Shore expansion, and one is the Marquette plan as far as recapturing the lake shore. That's clear. I share your commitment on buses, and in 2001 secured $792,000 for the Gary Transit Authority. In 2006, secured a federal earmark for a study as to regional bus systems. Certainly, the mayor as well as the members of this council have assiduously worked to try to have responsive fixed bus service throughout Hammond. I understand the negotiations and the relationship with the regional bus authority, and I also appreciate that as we stand here tonight throughout Northwest Indiana, including your fine community, we have less than we had a couple years ago. That remains on the table. I would point out within the last 2 weeks, I've had conversations with the Gary Transit Authority. It is the one bus service, if you would, that has taxing authority under the state of Indiana. It is my understanding they are looking to expand their services, not just north-south, but east-west, including the community of Hammond. In the end, from my perspective in Northwest Indiana, and I would revert back to my comments about Chicago, it's mass transit. I must tell you, I am here tonight to ask for Hammond's participation in the South Shore expansion. But it will not be successful if we don't do buses. That other half of mass transit will, too. And certainly remain committed to that, as I know the administration is.
Mr. President,
Councilman Higgs.
There was funding for the regional bus authority that was provided by the RDA.
RDA, right. In saying that, I mean, initially when the buses were taken, I think I was very vocal about them not being removed from this area. And I don't know how many of my other colleagues I've seen out there visually showing opposition to them being taken away. Needless to say, certainly buses are needed as well as the expansion. So one hand can work without the other one. The reality of it is, what's the cost? And I think that's the main concern of the mayor and the administration at this point. What is it going to cost? How is it going to affect the city?
On buses,
That's the key point that you need to convey to my colleagues.
Right.
You can sit here and go around and around and give them, throw out numbers, but the reality of it is they want to know, how is it going to help Hammond?
right. Hammond is helped as you proceed and have a regional bus authority. You are right, there is now money not changing hands between the Regional Development Authority and the RBA. I would simply point out that the RDA is charged with essentially building out systems. They're not to run the municipal lakefront in Whiting. They're not to run the Portage Lakefront Park in Portage, Indiana. They're not to tell the mayor of Hammond how he should or should not continue the development of Work Lake. That's a collegial collaborative effort. It is not for the RDA to tell the city of Gary how they ought to operate the Gary Airport on a daily basis. It is to help develop these systems and then let the appropriate authorities, in the case of the South Shore, NICTE, continue to then run it. I would also point out, because you raised the question about stations,
Thank you.
I do not mean to be short with you. but I would make one observation at the beginning. If the South Shore is not expanded, there will be no new station in Hammond. There will be no new station in Hammond because there will not be an expansion of the rail line in Hammond. Having said that, at this point in the studies that have been done, $25.387 million have been identified for stations, with at least 3 stations to be constructed along that line. What I cannot tell any of you, and I have had conversations with a number of you, obviously the mayor and I have had a close communication, I cannot guarantee anything. When I came to the city of Hammond in 2004 for a study about where the right-of-ways should go to Valparaiso and Lowell, Hammond participated in providing monies for part of that non-federal match. And I was asked in 2004, where are the stations going to go? I said, at that point, I don't know where the line's going to go, and the line to Valpo changed because of that study. The next important step in that, and I'm very serious about this, is next month, what is called the environmental impact statement will begin, and that's a necessary step before federal application is made. All of us, I think, conjure immediately what an environmental impact statement is, but it is much broader in this instance than our first impressions, and that is to sit down with all of the communities of interest, which is why this has been such a healthy exercise in going to places like Snyder, as well as the largest city in the county. And having that interchange and those conversations and those planning sessions, because how can we, to the benefit of the quality of life of Hammond, develop that train and decide where those stations go? All I have suggested, and again, I cannot and am not guaranteeing any community, any station, anywhere. But as a Notre Dame grad. I have, on more than one occasion last week, indicated that in Hammond, Indiana, you've got 10,000 students at a university. And that is a source of intense pride. I was interviewed by 2 students. One was from Columbia, and we're not talking Columbia, Indiana. The other was from the Philippines, going to school in Hammond, Indiana. It just cries out that while the rail line doesn't abut the campus, you've got a university that's expanding. The city has worked as far as the athletic field to enhance the value of that resource. You get a continuous shuttle from that university and that fount of knowledge and those incubators for businesses that are going on to and from Chicago. I tell people I'm happy to sit down with you and make that argument without being able to guarantee. I would also point out that under the study, the connection of that east-west, north-south line will be on the Indiana side of the line. I'm an accounting major from IU. I'm not an engineer. But I don't know if you're going east, west, north, south in Hammond, how you change trains without some type of nexus between those tracks.
So you're saying that right now there are 3 stations in the plan, and if it's going south, you can figure that one of the stations are in Munster and the other is in Dyer. So that means then that perhaps there will be just 1 station here in Hammond to be determined.
In the plan, there are at least 3 stations.
Okay.
And again, it is anticipated as part of the initial construction cost that $25.4 million has been set aside for those. And again, people have asked, well, if you're going to have all this development, sometimes they don't necessarily see it on the existing line. He said, one, that line was built 100 years ago. The city of Hammond, which was founded in 1884, wasn't all that large back then. Gary hardly existed. Today, the purpose of this is for job and economic development. And so the issue is, where can you maximize that potential in Northwest Indiana? And I think about Hammond. Hammond is willing to take a reasoned chance and to put some money on the line and to make an investment to grow your city despite all the difficulties you had and all the hard times. Think about the college bond program. No good deed goes unpunished. People have been criticized because of that. Hey, I want to help young people. I want to get them an education. I want to do everything I can to keep people in Hammond and attract them. Wolf Lake, think about what's going on in North Hammond. Hammond invested money they could have used for some other purpose, but they saw that longer term, it is going to grow that tax base. And I am convinced to the bottom of my heart that this place is going to be hopping when this thing gets built.
Mr. President,
Councilman.
Because the one final issue that has to be resolved is the non-federal share. The federal government, as far as the matrix, if you would, the justification and all of the cost-benefit ratios for the South Shore expansion, there's, again, no guarantee in life, but I wouldn't waste a second of your time, the mayor's time, anybody's time, if I didn't think we just get gold stars on every one. What's absent is that 50-50 match. I have obviously secured, with the help of this council and this mayor, matching funds for studies of this issue in the past. But as far as going forward, those federal monies are not available until that match is known and it is secure.
Mr. Congressman.
Councilman Spitali, you had a question?
Yeah. First deadline. Why?
Councilman, I would say several things. One, it is jobs. We will continue to make more steel than any place in the United States. But as I think we all understand, that's not a growth industry as far as employment. We had a huge uptick in construction jobs at Amoco BP. There's not going to be huge growth. The fact is, we do need to grow this economy. Children haven't come back because they don't have, from their perspective, that opportunity for a job. So I would tell you that's the urgency. And if that first train doesn't run for 9 years, and again, my commitment is to suppress that time. We need, I mean, that's why you're here tonight, to think about economic. You need jobs now. Secondly, Janet Moran, who was on this council, first talked about this 27 years ago. As the mayor of Michigan City said of July of last year, and they have gone through a process as far as trying to accentuate a new South Shore stock and its economic development. He says, you know what, we're all visioned up, we got to act. And part of this was very arbitrary on my part, and it was, if you would, fashioned because of the schedule of the Indiana General Assembly. We're all human beings, and I think we all respond to, if you would, deadlines and making a decision. Wanted, if you would, to see if the legislature was going to hopefully be of some assistance. And additionally, I must tell you, just it's human nature. It has nothing to do with Hammond or Maryville where I live or any of us. It's human nature. If you give me something and then you call me back in 6 months and say I need some of it back, I like you, I might do it. Nah, I might not do it. But it's harder for you. You're in that spot where you're making a profound decision right now on a new source of revenue for economic development. And this is the time, if you would, to make that decision.
What about the fate of our Goslin Street station right now? What will happen with that?
I'm sorry?
The Goslin Street station, What will happen with that?
Councilman, again, I cannot comment on what happens with an existing station or where new stations are going to be constructed, except to say again that within the proposed plan, that intersection of the north, south, east, west line is going to be in the city of Hammond. And obviously, that has to be done in close consultation with the city administration and the council as to what's best for the train and the city.
Congressman, so Munster, do they or do that now? What's going to be in their town? They came up with their money and they're ready to go forth. Do they know what's going to happen to their town?
No. Had a meeting this afternoon, and there were 3 officials from the town of Munster. I think it's public information that the town has acquired certain properties in anticipation that they might have a station and it might be there. And they understand it might not be.
No
They know
guarantee
there
on
is
anything
no
for anyone, you're
guarantee.
saying? No guarantee for anybody right now?
No guarantee for Munster, no guarantee for Dyer, except if we don't do something, nobody gets anything.
Mr. President,
Councilman,
and yet
Councilman,
in 2 sentences, you also said that Munster has already acquired properties with the anticipation of this plan going forward. So I'm wondering, they're moving forward, but yet and still, there are questions that have not been answered, and people are still wondering if, do I say yes, but we don't know what we're doing, or do we say no, and we jeopardize future economic development of the region?
I would say that Munster, and I do not speak for any town, is trying to anticipate the future. And if you would, and again, I do not pretend to speak for them, taking a reasonable risk on behalf of their citizens. If you think about town government in Munster, they had, I'm old enough, we used to call it a garbage dump. It's now solid waste disposal site on Calumet.
For years.
It was opened apparently in the 1960s, and they thought someday, when they closed it, that they would develop it for a park. They did. And again, I think that this city, again, given the challenges you face, said, you know what, we can't think short term. We're going to have to take, again, a reasonable chance to invest money on that north end. Talking about athletic fields at Purdue to enhance it isn't without controversy. You think about the efforts that the city administration made on behalf of economic development, and there's a Cabela and other activity and people working there when the Little Cal project wasn't done yet. But you know what? We got to get our tax base grown. We got to put somebody to work. We think the Little Cal is going to be finished. We're not going to wait. We're going to take action. That's the kind of leadership I see in Hammond.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
How much money are you asking Hammond to contribute?
I am asking each community for 34% of their 1/4. For Hammond, that comes out to in excess of 800. Bond issue, and it is a 30-year commitment we're looking for, is it is for a railroad that will be there 100 years from now. Secondly, some communities, Munster, are going to begin to pay into the fund this year. What we are asking all communities is, if you could do that, that would be wonderful. But in any event, we are asking everyone to begin paying in February of 2015. That would be wonderful as well.
If it's not built by a certain date, I know you projected some timeline, will the money come back to the communities? How will that work?
If you send me that money, I'll send it to you. No. It's an excellent question, and at this point, it is anticipated that the county, since it is a portion of a county revenue, would essentially, for each community, per what their commitment is, would hold that money. And it is my understanding that the Lake County government today is working on a draft that they would share with all of the participants for their input to essentially say, we would withhold your commitment in an interest-bearing account because you have people on the county council and on the commission, so that if for some reason this project does not go forward, and I don't anticipate, but if it doesn't, get your money back.
Who will
And that
manage-
way you go to the county, you don't go to a third-party intermediary.
Thank you. Who will manage the project?
It would be the commuter district, NICD, because I also point out, when I testified before the Indiana General Assembly in '06 and '07 on this very matter, it was a moment of pride in each instance, because if you look at any indice as to quality of rail service, they're top 5, minimum top 10 in any national indice as far as benefit, cost per passenger mile, timeliness, what have you. And so in the end, because it is a state-created entity to begin with, the county has 2 representatives on the board, as do the other 3 adjoining counties. They would essentially do that. But it would be an inclusive process, again, as far as proceeding.
Thank you. Will there be freight line service on this line?
I'm sorry.
Freight lines, will there be trains other than commuter rail, commuters on this line?
There are not at this point. And again, I think, because I don't want to misspeak.
1 track or 2?
One
1 track.
track.
And we don't know yet what the exact route running through Hammond would be, where it would go through, or is that determined already?
To a large degree, it is, but I think some of it is to be determined. Because again, you now have, and Hammond did cooperate on the purchase in 1993, the old Monon line that essentially would take you to Dyer. Having said that, as the environmental impact statement goes, and getting back to the earlier questions on intersections of tracks, locations of stations, one from an economic standpoint, that is cost. One from an economic standpoint, benefit to not just Hammond, but the greater Northwest Indiana area from an economic and jobs perspective. Where are those nexuses going to take place? And that will be very carefully studied. So I wouldn't suggest you just straight shot down that Monon.
One more question.
Sure.
You talked about you'd like Hammond to contribute the amount of 800,000 through the formula of 34% and 1/4 of. That's sort of the wish, but what will you take from Hammond?
Three things. One, I want to back up on the right-of-way for just 1 second and make an important point. We own the right-of-way. I mentioned gold stars earlier in that federal process. The fact that you're not ripping through a downtown area or a business district or homes, you own the right-of-way. You own the right-of-way. That's golden. I was at a dinner and people were talking about high-speed rail in California, and someone blamed the Environmental Protection Agency because it was going to take 20 years to build the line, and someone corrected them and said, no, we don't own the right-of-way. You're all familiar with that process, so that's one point. The second point is you're an independent body. You have a mayor in this community. You are elected to represent the interests of the citizens of Hammond for today and for 25 years from now. I would leave that judgment to you because only you can make the right judgment. and I trust your judgment.
You know, I was one of those people who walked to the train from my house in Hammond, and for 7 years. And I know the utility of having that sort of luxury. But in all the time the Hammond station has been there, as I'm hearing talk and discussion about TODs being developed around all these train stations, that hasn't happened in the existing stations in the urban corridor. How can we get help in creating those TODs at the same time the suburban communities are creating theirs?
Is about the next 2 years for that economic environmental impact statement. To do it right. The beautiful thing here is you're starting from scratch. And I think one of the comparisons 100 years ago, and I mentioned it before, and it's a legitimate criticism, people have mentioned Hammond, although I have seen that parking lot and that utilization of that station grow. But I think what you're talking about is, okay, and where's that permanent economic development, increase in property values, jobs?
And will we lose some of that as the new
Is-
station and the users drive to the suburban site?
Right. It was built 100 years ago. That's why there's so much importance attached to these next couple of years as that consideration as to how do we do it best. You know, I have been in office for some number of years. One of my great regrets is I have only had one person ever walk into my office in Washington, D.C. I'll never forget the day. A university professor at Illinois. She said, I drove to your district. Everybody else has driven through my district. And it's not my district, it's the people's district. You wanted to attract people, which I want to get back to Purdue. You do a station near Purdue, and I'm not guaranteeing anything. I see it. I don't live in Munster. I don't speak for Munster, but I think it includes Hammond too. Everybody thinks of tax base as horizontal. I think of tax bases as vertical. It's one of the reasons I want to recapture the lakeshore. I look at Chicago. Then I look at Chicago and Hammond and Gary and East Chicago on a map of the United States. We're not that far apart. Is there some law of physics that says we can't do that in Northwest Indiana if we put our mind to it? Absolutely not. I could someday, this is my imagination, see a vertical urban downtown in Munster. Cedar Lake ultimately used to be a reverse commute. People would vacation in Cedar Lake. People would go to Cedar Lake for a weekend. The beauty for you and for each community, you get to decide. And each community can be different, and that's the beauty of Northwest Indiana. A little bit of diversity as far as how it's used maximizes the potential. And on the existing line, Gary's going through the process now of considering how they will consolidate stations and maximize economic development in the Etna-Miller area. I mentioned Mayor Muir. One of the things we want to ask the General Assembly for next year, no guarantee. Give us some tools that we can use in Hammond and Holbert, any place, but that they can use in Michigan City and, God forbid, South Bend to improve the existing line. If the existing line is improved and we maximize the economic potential of Michigan City and South Bend, we benefit. If we extend the railroad, and I've talked to every NICD commissioner along that line all the way to St. Joe County and emphasize, and they understand it, if they grow their system, everybody benefits. If you're static in this world, what's happened to us? We've lost 9.6% of our people.
And finally, just comment on this. Economic stratification to foster more sprawl and encourage disinvestment in the core urban areas of Lake County. How would you?
I categorically deny that. On for Hammond, East Chicago, Gary, Whiting. People are going to get on the train and leave Hammond. They left. They left. My dad was mayor of Gary. It was the second largest city in the state of Indiana when he was mayor. Hammond's bigger than Gary. Hammond is the largest city in Lake County today. They left. Our responsibility for the people who are here today and who we want to move here and to develop this and grow our economy is to look ahead and make that type of investment and attract them back. It's no secret. People move south. Those people are 43% older. They ain't moving back. Let's get some new people in Hammond with energy and drive and money.
Thank you for indulging me. Much appreciated.
Mr. President.
Councilman,
One thing I'd like to mention is the district councilmen here in the last 3 years have been forced due to budget constraints, or due to the property tax caps covering the budget that we have, we've lost over half of our infrastructure money just to balance the budget in Hammond. Again, the COIT was established with a lot of arguing that we were to maybe get some relief from that, and part of that money now would go to the South Shore expansion. The 4th District is right in the heart of this, 173rd and Lyman. It seems to be one of, and I know you're not talking about stations tonight, but I did realize that 173rd and Lyman is 3.1 miles from the center almost of Lansing, Illinois. And to me, I think there'd be a lot of people that would probably come over to Hammond if there was a station there. But beyond a station, my own plans for that area were at some point a soccer field, and Councilman Hinojosa has a really nice soccer complex, maybe a hockey rink, a dog park, et cetera. And I think maybe we could do both. However, that said, what I do know with some recent data is in the 4th District, in the first quarter of this year, we have 32 foreclosed homes. We had 152 foreclosures in 2013. Unfortunately, that's the leader of the city. It's not a thing I'm proud of. I don't want to be leading in that. I think a station there may or may not. And again, I don't have the data. I don't have a crystal ball, rather. That may decrease that. And I know it's a nationwide problem, but it gets to my main point. Whether it's a nationwide problem or not, it's a problem in the 4th District. When people call me, they want streets, lights, sidewalks. By the way, pool repairs. A pool, and I told this to the Parks Department director, absolutely. If it's my choice on that, absolutely fix the pool, because to me, if you have a park, people will want to move next to a park with a pool than just an empty park with maybe some swings. So that was a no-brainer, but this is $500 million. And I think, long story short, if Hammond benefits from this, then it's something that I would like to do it. Unfortunately, you can't address what I think is the mix that's very important is where would these stations be? So if we don't, then we have a train running through our city. We have a lot of those, as we heard in caucus, tying up freight trains in Hessville.
I didn't notice.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. So I want to leave with a hypothetical. Let's say this project stopped at 173rd and Lyman and Hammond. Just stop. That's all you could do. I'm wondering if Munster, Dyer, Highland, and Cedar Lake would be willing to give up millions of their tax dollars to build a train that would stop at 173rd and Lyman and Hammond. I doubt it, and I wouldn't blame them. I wouldn't blame them a bit. So that's all. I don't know if there was a lot of questions in there, but.
Is for those of you on the council, the clerk, the mayor, always getting criticized. Always getting criticized. One, we can all do better. You don't get along. You don't work together. You're not thinking about anything, so forth and so on. I said, right off the bat in Hammond, and I think it's an important point to make, Mayor Stahura had a decision to make about rebuilding his water filtration plant. He could have done that, had more city employees, and nobody could have criticized him for it. It was on 119th Street. He said, you know what, I can reduce my city budget. I can hook into Hammond. Hammond has more customers. I have economic development, and you know the vibrancy on 119th, it's worth making that investment. And the mayor stepped up to the plate and said, I want to cooperate with you. In answer to whether Munster or Dyer or Cedar Lakewood, all I know is at 7 o'clock tonight, Snyder, 277 people know that train's going to be in Hammond. They want to help pay for it. I was with Mayor Snedeker this week more than once. You can't get farther away. Wants to help pay for the train. Mayor Soderquist, Lake Station, they have serious problems, as you do, running his city. He said, you know what? If nothing else, this is a Lake County tax, the first engineer, the first consultant, the first person who goes to work on this project. And it's not the train, it's everything that comes after it. And they pay that income tax, that goes into that pot, and part of that pot's redistributed to everybody, including citizens of Hammond. Maybe it's I'm Slovak, but you gotta invest $1 to make a few cents once in a while. And I do look back to our region. And I think about the people that built those mills, built this city, built those refineries. And I bet not many of them were even looking for help from the federal government or anybody else. They just did it. I remember when my parents' generation built 2 more steel mills in Porter County, and they built I-65, and they built the Borman Expressway as crowded as it could be. And I truly believe it is our time to make that transformational generation investment for people today. Because it's not something that you're going to see the results in 9 years. I'm convinced things start happening once people know we're going to build this train out.
Congressman Keith has an appointment. He needed to be out of here by 7. I just want to remind the council.
Right.
Until he gets on a roll.
Right.
I just want to find out. He has to go back to DC, so I just wanted to make sure. he's there.
Thanks.
He has a plan.
Mr. President,
Councilman Hinojosa?
people June 11th.
You start when you were 9?
No, no. Thank you. No gray hair yet. Yes, the steel industry is booming right now. We're putting out steel like you wouldn't believe. And my comment is, you told us all these cities that are online, and in fact, you said Schneider's probably going to pass it tonight. On the timeline, are they passing it by resolution? And is that something, you said the deadline is March 31st, so it means that if you wanted Hammond on board, we'd have to pass it by March 31st?
Councilman, that is again for you to decide. Boards, everybody has done it somewhat differently. What I would suggest, very importantly, is to know what Hammond's commitment will be, that you feel comfortable with, that you can make a commitment for, and that be known whether or not every last procedure that you need to do has been accomplished, but that would be a very important point because we do want to proceed.
And that deadline is March 31st.
Next Monday. Yes, sir.
Okay, Councilman Boskowski, on behalf of myself and all my colleagues, I have a safe trip to DC.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity very, very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Congressman.
Mr. President, could we give Congressman a big round of applause for coming in here and answering questions? Thank you.
Councilman Spitali.
The motion to accept the minutes from the March 10th, 2014 meeting.
There's a motion by Councilman Spitali, second by Councilman Kowinski to accept the minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes pass. Approval of claims.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Markovich.
move for approval of claims March 5th through March 19, 2014 for council meeting March 24, 2014. Beginning with claims dated 3/6/14 and ending with claims dated 3/19/14, claims number 1620 through claim number 1903 for a total of $4,572,051.54. I so move.
Second.
There's a motion by Councilman Markovich, second by Councilman Higgs to accept the claims. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Markovich.
couple additions. Claim number 1904, $5,000 to 1257 Arcade Street, St. Paul, Minnesota. It's a warrant wire transfer for Artist Representation and Management, Inc. Claim number 1905, 7,500 Down Boys, Inc. It's, I believe it's another warrant. And claim number 1906, Michael Golan, $1,000. Michael Golan and Friends Opening Act for, I believe it's for the April 12th concert at the Civic Center. I so move.
There's an amended motion by Councilman Markovich. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilwoman Venez. Is there any discussion on the amended motion? All those in favor? Or no, I'm sorry. Clerk Golick, roll call vote on the amended version.
Markovich.
Yes.
Spitali.
Yes.
Vines.
Yes.
Kalwinski.
Yes.
Ulaki.
Yes.
Higgs.
Yes.
Emerson.
Yes.
Enosa.
Yes.
Opinker.
Yes, claims as amended passes, 9-0. Now the claims is written. Clerk Golick, roll call vote.
Markovich.
Yes.
Spitali.
Yes.
Vines.
Yes.
Kalwinski.
Yes.
Ulaki.
Yes.
Higgs.
Yes.
Emerson.
Yes.
Enosa.
Yes.
Opinker.
Yes, claims pass, 9-0. Moving on to public hearing, there is none. Next will be communications.
Mr. President,
Councilman Higgs.
did receive correspondence from the Hammond Federated Order of Police, Lodge 51 of 7527 Kennedy Avenue, Hammond, Indiana. It says, as the president of the Hammond Fraternal Order of Police, I'm writing you the letter to ask for your support. We are a nonprofit organization with hundreds of active, retired, and associate members throughout the city, county, and state. Our organization exists to provide a voice to protect the rights of the police officers dedicating their lives to protecting and serving our community. We are also a very active organization in the community. Some examples of our participation would be our annual December food drive, which provides food baskets for struggling families and fundraisers held in our facility for families who have come upon unfortunate circumstances. The Hammond FOP Lodge 51 is holding its 36th annual Smelt Fry on Friday, April 25th, 2014. The Smelt Fry is our own primary fundraising event to generate the funds needed to continue our active involvement within the community. The effort is all-you-can-eat buffet of smelts, sides, and salads. There are numerous raffles, door prizes, tip boards will be sold throughout the evening. Our smelt fry has been attracted by hundreds of voters from around the county in over 20 years. We would like to offer you the same opportunity to support our organization while at the same time gaining support and visibility for your office. Please take the time to look over your opportunities to the following page, and it says any support to our effort would be appreciated. If you have any questions, feel free to call 219-808-8069. Sincerely, Paul Mendondolo, President of the Fraternal Order of Lodge 51.
Okay, at our last meeting, I believe it was Councilman Higgs sent for some correspondence in regards to the Woodmar project. I received a letter from Westland Kramer and Bennett, who was handling that case. The letter reads as follows. Dear Mr. Opinker, please allow this correspondence to serve to respond to your March 11, 2014 correspondence to Mr. Talon with regards to the above referenced matter. As you may or may not be aware, there's currently two lawsuits pending regarding the Woodmar project. All of the lawsuits involve the alleged failure to pay subcontractors and mortgage holders on the property. The subcontractors have filed a foreclosure of their mechanics liens, and the bank has filed a foreclosure of its mortgage. Estimated liability for the developer in these cases is approximately $4 million. The Hammond Redevelopment Commission has been named as a defendant in both of the above referenced cases to answer as to any interest it may have in the Woodmar Mall real estate. After the Hammond Redevelopment Commission was named as a defendant, the Hammond Redevelopment Commission initiated legal action against the developer to recover the $475,000 incentive which was previously paid to the developer as a first payment under the development agreement. The developer has countersued the Hammond Redevelopment Commission and requested that the Hammond Redevelopment Commission be required to pay the balance of the incentive owed under the development agreement. At this point, we are working through the discovery process of the litigation. The above is a brief outline of the Woodmar project that you requested. If you would like to discuss this litigation in more detail, I would be happy to appear at an executive session called for that purpose. If you should have any questions regarding this matter, please do not hesitate to contact me. Very truly yours, David W. Westland.
Mr. President.
Council.
With regard to Councilman Higgs' complaint that there is no movement on the Woodmar project.
That's correct, Councilwoman.
Alrighty, thank you.
Getting this case, but I'm aware, being the mayor for the past 10 years, I'm aware of what's gone on with this. To make a long story short, there was a dispute with the developer between the city of Hammond and the developer about whether or not Hammond owed any more money to the developer. We feel that the developer breached the contract. The developer felt that we were under an obligation to pay him money that was due by a certain date. If the project was completed, we didn't think it was substantially completed by that date, failed to pay in accordance with the contract, because our point was it was a breach of contract. The developer didn't pay the contractors that did work. Everybody got sued, including ourselves. Our action is a breach of contract against Mr. Markopoulos, the owner of the property. I still, to this day, feel like he breached the contract. I think we're in the right. Obviously, we have to work our way through litigation. If anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
It's just ridiculous that the fact.
Councilman Higgs, I do know that there. On that. So if you wanted to develop the rest of the property that didn't involve this parcel to the north of Carson Prairie Scott, we would be open-minded to that, Councilman Higgs. We're not holding that against the developer because, like you, I want to see that property developed. But when it comes to the dispute over the outlots to the north, I think we're in the right, Councilman Higgs, and I think you'd probably agree with us that to pay the developer when they breach the contract would be not wise for the city. You know, the contract's a contract. Councilwoman Venez, I believe that did. I think Councilman Higgs requested a status update. I think that's how this came about. That's why Mr. Westland wrote the letter. I remember reading that in the council minutes. So
we can't.
Question, Councilwoman. If the developer has a project, we will not hold it against the developer to continue forward. Say, for instance, they had a project on one of the other pieces of property owned by Mr. Markopoulos on Woodmar, we would proceed. But if it has anything to do with the current parcel and the incentive package that he feels that we breached and we feel that he breached, we can't move forward on that. But he does own the entire parcel, including the outlots to the south of the Carson Prairie Scott. And if he was interested in pursuing forward on that, we would work with him, Councilwoman. Because like Councilman Higgs, I want to see development out there. It's my neighborhood also. I mean, it's literally, I bet you I live closer to it than Councilman Higgs does. So I personally would like to see it developed as well. Thank you, Mr.
Mayor.
President.
Any other? Moving on to committee reports. Committee reports.
Mr. President,
Councilwoman Vines.
council as a whole will bring out 1407.
Second?
Second it. Just bringing it out. Yeah, you're just bringing it out.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring it out.
Any other committee reports? Committee reports is now closed. Moving on to number 9, ordinances, third and final reading.
Ordinance number 14-07, sponsored by Councilwoman Vines. An ordinance creating a new non-reverting fund, number 507, entitled the Local Pretrial Diversion and Deferral Fund.
Mr. President,
Councilwoman Vines.
I move for final passage of 1407.
It's a motion by Councilwoman Vines for final passage of 1407. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Hinojosa. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Councilwoman Vines.
this ordinance is to establish a non-reverting fund for a program that the Lake County Prosecutor and the Hammond City Judge Harkin are partnering on. This fund will house the dollars received from a person who comes before the court who had a driving infraction, and they will pay $189.50. If their driving record remains clear for a period of 6 months, then that driving infraction will not go on their record. Of that $189.50, $79.50 will go to court cost, and the remaining $110 is split between the Lake County Prosecutor and the Hammond City Court. And the Hammond City Court will use those funds to pay for part-time help. Thank you.
Vote.
Markovich.
Yes.
Spitali.
Yes.
Vines.
Yes.
Kalwinski.
Yes.
Ulaki.
Yes.
Higgs.
Yes.
Emerson.
Yes.
Enosa.
Yes.
Opinker.
Yes. Ordinance 1407 passes 9-0.
President Opinker, that concludes the ordinances for final passage.
Thank you, Clerk Golick. Moving on to introduction of ordinances.
Item A, ordinance 14-08, sponsored by Councilwoman Vines. An ordinance amending ordinance numbers 7415 and ordinance of the City of Hammond stating the policy on the use of drugs and alcohol by city employees.
Mr. President. And place in council as a whole.
Second.
Councilwoman Vines is the first, Councilman Spitali is the second on ordinance 1408, put in council as a whole. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President. Our employee handbook and how we handle situations with drugs and alcohol, being that state and federal laws have changed since 1991. We're just going to update our handbook. Thank you. Aye.
Opposed? First and second passes.
President Opinker, that concludes the introduction of ordinances.
Thank you again, Clerk Golick. Moving on to resolutions, there are none. Next will be new and unfinished business.
Mr. President. Involved in Crime Watch have been referred to as do-gooders. I'd like to read to you an excerpt from a recent article in the Times that illustrates how the Crime Watch message really works. This was from March 14th. Hammond resident Kathy Martin was just ending her shift at the Marathon gas station on Calumet Avenue late Wednesday when she noticed a woman standing inside the gas station store looking lost. Within the space of the next several minutes, Martin made a decision regarding the woman that led to the rescue of a missing 1-year-old Milwaukee girl. Martin had her cell phone in hand, ready to call police. A former captain in the Hammond Crime Watch program, Martin recalled that Hammond Police Community Resources Officer Sergeant Muta said, "People should not be afraid to call the police, and people's failure to call is how criminals get away with things." Thank you to everyone who is involved with Crime Watch. Thank you all for caring about your neighborhood, because that is how change happens. One gesture, one person, one moment at a time. I would like to read some of the upcoming Crime Watch meetings and community meetings in our neighborhoods. The Pulaski Park Neighborhood Association will meet Tuesday, March 25th at 6:30 p.m.
Tom
That's
McDermott,
at the
make
American
sure you make the
Legion on
announcement.
Goslin. Edison Community Watch will meet Wednesday, April 2nd at Edison School beginning at 6:30. Harrison Park Crime Watch will meet Wednesday, April 2nd at the VFW on Holman Avenue. That is at 5 p.m. On Thursday, April 10th, 7 p.m., the India Lee Crime Watch will meet at the Woodmar United Methodist Church. I'm sorry, that's not correct. It's at the First Methodist Church on Holman Avenue. Incidentally, that evening from 6:30 to 7 p.m., there will be a reception for our retiring Chief of Police, Brian Miller. So I invite everyone to come out and wish Brian well. The Jefferson Crime Watch will be Wednesday, March 26th. That's at the Woodmar United Methodist Church. No, that's wrong. That's at the Jefferson School. I'm sorry, and that begins at 6:30. And also the Whiting Robertsdale Crime Watch, Thursday, April 10th. That will be at Calumet College beginning at 6:30 p.m. Thank you.
Bring out an ordinance. I'll have to suspend the rules. I believe it'll be, if it comes out, it'll be ordinance 209. I'd like to suspend the rules to bring out an ordinance.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to suspend the rules. Councilman Hinojosa, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Higgs. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Okay. Clerk Gollert, roll call vote on suspending the rules.
Markovich.
Yes.
Spitali.
Yes.
Vines.
Yes.
Kalwinski.
Yes.
Ulaki.
Yes.
Higgs.
Yes.
Emerson.
Yes.
Hinosa.
Yes.
Opinker.
Yes. 9-0, rules suspended.
Mr. President,
Councilman Hinojosa.
again, I believe this ordinance is going to be 14-09. I'd like to bring it out for first and second reading.
Okay, there's a motion by Councilman Hinojosa for first and second reading. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Higgs. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Mayor?
we talked about this ordinance in caucus. I was hoping it wouldn't come out, but Councilman Hinojosa brought it out. So this is an ordinance that we're literally, and I know the public wasn't part of our caucus before, and we talked about this at length. The ink isn't even dry on the contract that was just signed by the Hammond firefighters, and this ordinance that Councilman Hinojosa is bringing forward proposes to give back all the gains that we made during our negotiations. There hasn't been any cost projections done on this. There hasn't been any staffing level projections. I asked Councilman Hinojosa in the caucus if we did this, if we'd still be able to keep truck one open. He did not know. I can tell you right now that Hammond firefighters just voted on a 3-year deal. 70% of the Hammond firefighters voted for that deal literally weeks ago, and we're giving back everything we gained. Truck one is in service. We have more firefighters staffed right now, and we're not hemorrhaging overtime money in the Hammond Fire Department. It was a hard-fought contract that we worked hard to get to. As the council full well knows, it went past January 1st, which is the first time in a long, long time that nobody's had a contract, that the firemen haven't had a contract in the city of Hammond. We hammered it out in front of the Hammond Council, and here we are just a couple weeks later talking about giving back our gains. I strongly urge the council to stand up and support the administration that negotiated this contract. You know, this is taxpayer money we're talking about.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other discussion?
Mr. President,
Councilman Hinojosa.
Ed O'Malley, the president of the union, which is not the one that asked me to bring this out, is not here, and not here to defend the numbers that may come out. In fact, we still don't know all the numbers, and that's why we bring it out and we put it in first and second reading. And next meeting on the April 14th, and we'll be able to talk about it in detail. But what I do have is, if you remember at the Festival of Lakes, there was a race out there that if you beat the mayor, you get a free day off, and you got paid. What did that cost the taxpayers? Zero, nothing. I mean, if that's what the mayor wants to do, that's fine. But this right here is for year 2014 and 2015. If you remember, months ago, we passed a budget. This is months ago. They just passed the contract for the firefighters just not too long ago. But months ago, we passed a budget for the policemen and the firemen, for everybody's budget with the pay raises. And last year, the seniority days were part of the budget last year. Negotiated, I mean, not negotiated, but in the contract that we signed a contract months ago, it was in there that those seniority days were included in there. So what is it costing the taxpayers, or they're not getting their seniority days because it was negotiated under contract that they are not going to get those 5 days. So where is that money going to go to? How much money are we saving, and where is it going to go to?
Mr. President?
I'm not finished yet. Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Over the last 5 years, the firefighters have dropped the overall staffing from 180 to 155. The firefighters have given up 1% pension to help pay for safety of the citizens and themselves. Police and firefighters, most of the time, have been treated equally. Why not now? What I'm asking is why. I mean, I think they passed the contract because if they wouldn't have passed this contract, they wouldn't have got what they got, period. But why wasn't the firemen treated exactly just like the firemen? I mean, the police officers. Police officers get their 5-day seniority. How come the firefighters don't?
Mr. President?
I'm not finished yet. Excuse me. I know it's been talked about that Chico hasn't lifted a finger with the negotiations, but I know at the last meeting when that was negotiated, I did talk about it, and we did. I think everybody came to the conclusion that we need to get a contract, and the contract was signed. I'm just asking this to go in first and second reading, and we can give O'Malley a chance to come up with the figures, just like you're coming up with figures, but I don't think we have the correct figures yet, and that's why this goes into committee for the meeting for April 14th, where we can discuss it in further detail.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. President, Councilman Hinojosa was correct in one thing he said. Its seniority days were negotiated out of the contract. You were right about that, Councilman Hinojosa. I don't agree with pretty much everything else you said, but you're right about that. Firefighters, 70% of the firefighters negotiated this out of the contract and voted for this contract. And here we are 3 weeks later, and you're attempting to give them back everything that we negotiated out. Councilman Hinojosa also indicated that we should treat them exactly, the firemen exactly the same as Hammond Police Department, who has seniority days. Incorrect statement, Councilman Hinojosa. Hammond police officers do not have seniority days. I don't know where you got that information from. And if I were a councilman, I'm not, and if I were floating an ordinance that affected city budget in first and second reading, I would certainly know the financial impact to the city of Hammond. I would certainly make it clear how much this is going to cost, how much this is going to affect manpower, whether it's going to affect truck one. It's not time to do the homework after you file it. You do the homework before you file it, Councilman Hinojosa. For you to say that is ridiculous, in my opinion.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? First and second passes. Any other known unfinished business?
Mr. President, I make a motion that we go back to the regular order of business. I so move.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Higgs to go back to regular order of business, second by Councilman Hinojosa. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Back to regular order of business. Any other known unfinished business?
Mr. President,
Councilman Higgs.
I'd like a letter sent to the street department in regarding fixing the pothole in the 400 block of Detroit. I so move.
It's a motion by Councilman Higgs, second, Motion by Councilman Higgs to send a letter to Street Department about potholes, 400 block, what was that street?
20 block of Detroit.
400 block of Detroit. All those in favor?
Aye.
Councilman Hinojosa. Any other new and unfinished business?
Mr. President.
Councilman Hinojosa.
Yeah, of course, where everybody's aware about the train tracks over the Hessville area, and they have gotten out of hand for weeks and weeks and months. I know the last major time, which might have been maybe 2 years ago, there was a letter sent to the engineer's office, and the trains complied, and they stood east of Grand Avenue. Therefore, I'd like to make a motion to have a letter sent to engineer office on the train blocking Grand Avenue, 173rd and Parish Avenue every day, all night. Ask that they get the train to stop east of Grand Avenue like they did in the past. I so move.
Second.
Motion by
Mr. President.
Councilman Hinojosa.
Of course, we have the Festival of the Lakes coming up pretty soon, and we haven't heard any financial reports. I know every time we ask for them, they're still working on them, Therefore, I'd like to make a motion to have a letter sent to the Park Department and the City Controller for copies of the 2011, 2012, 2013 Festival of the Lakes overall finance reports, including how police officers' pay was paid for by the city or by the wins and losses. I so move.
Second.
It's a motion by Councilman Hinojosa, second by Councilman Higgs to have a letter sent to the Park Department, City Controller on 2011, 2012, 2013, the financial outcome of the Festival of the Lakes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any other new unfinished business?
President.
Councilman Hinojosa.
Thank you. I have one more. I'd like to have a motion to send a letter to the police chief on how 2011, 2012, 2013 police officers were paid by the city budget or were they reimbursed by the wins of the Festival of the Lake. I so move.
There's a motion by Councilman Hinojosa. Second, do I have a second? To send a letter to the police chief on how do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Councilman Markovich to send a letter to the police chief on how the police officers were paid during work in the Festival of the Lakes 2011, 2012, and 2013. All those in favor?
Mr. President, could I also add on there at what rate did they get paid? A flat rate or was it time and a half?
Also, rate, time and a half, basically how they were paid. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. President,
Motion granted. Councilman
for
Higgs.
that last letter, I'd like a motion to be sent to the controller, because he would have the financial aspect as to how they were paid. So we need to include him in that. So I would like a letter sent to the city controller. I so move.
Second.
The letter, what was that letter again, Councilman Higgs?
I didn't start the letter, I'm just going by the second letter. The second letter is requesting how the police officers were paid. So
Okay.
I would think if anyone would know that would be the city controller, Bobby Lynn.
Right, so that motion should have been the letter sent to the controller's office as opposed to the police department on how the police officers were paid during Festival of the Lakes for 2011, 12, and 13. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any other new unfinished business?
Mr. President.
Councilman Emerson.
Irick of the school city. Hammond High School has 12 competitors in the Northwest Indiana Regional Science Fair, not to be confused with the Science Olympiad. That's a whole other entity. They were awarded medals, it says metals, it should be medals, scholarships and certificates. Five of the many students I have here, I don't have time to read them all, will be advancing to the State Science Fair competition, which will be held in Indianapolis on April 5th. Thank you.
Any other new unfinished business?
Mr. President.
Councilwoman Vines.
Many of our residents are mistakenly under the impression that repairs to our state roads are the responsibility of the city of Hammond. They are not. They are the responsibility of the state. Therefore, I would like to send a letter to Mr. Bob Alderman, Acting Deputy Commissioner of the INDOT LaPorte District Office. The address is 315 East Boyd Boulevard in LaPorte, Indiana. I request an assessment and repair of all state roads in Hammond, particularly Indianapolis Boulevard, going north from 8094, and also Calumet Avenue from 165th to Sibley, which is predominantly in the 3rd District. It is, Calumet Avenue is a mess. I so move.
Second.
There's a motion by Councilwoman Vines, second by Councilman Higgs. Of the state roads, which are suffering from extreme potholes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any other new and unfinished business? New and unfinished business is now closed. Now we're open for public expression. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. When you come up to the podium, state your name and address. Our first speaker be Mr. Vinny Paloma.
I want to talk about the South Shore. Mr. Emerson, my mom lives in your district. She lives right there on 165th at 408. Munster doesn't want the train there as it's going to be parked, okay? I don't know why Congressman Vislavsky never mentioned Griffith. You know, he said that Highland's in, Munster's in, Snyder's in. Why not Griffith? He never brought that one up, and I couldn't understand that one either. We don't want it here in Hammond, okay? I can understand infrastructure, I can understand the steel mill. That's what he went on. But everything else, the numbers just don't add up. You know, and that's all I have to say. Please do the right thing. And he's shoving down his throat. He gave us an ultimatum, March 31st. Councilman Higgs even brought that up. What is the significance of March 31st? We have to have this money. Councilman Emerson even brought up how many foreclosure homes were in his district. 6th District, Councilman also, where I live at. We had so many, I can't even count. You know, and it's just not right that he's just pressuring Hammond to come up with this money where, you know, we cut the fat. Where do we cut it at? Where do we break down and come up with this money that he's asking for? That's all I have to say, Councilman. And thank you, President Opinker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council. I'm a longtime South Shore commuter, and I'm also...
State your name and address,
My name is
please.
Charles Bowen. I live at 1336 River. I'm a longtime South Shore commuter, and I'm also a recent contributor to WGB Radio. I've been doing extensive research on this project, and there's a few things. Now, obviously, your council is here to do what's best for Hammond, not what's best for Munster, not what's best for Lowell, Valparaiso, or even Schneider. There's a few things that were missed tonight that I'd like to point out to all of you. You've talked about recently tonight about your issues with railroad crossings. One thing that wasn't brought up, you will get about a dozen new railroad crossings in town from this project. Another issue, I spoke to several members of NICD over the weekend regarding the plan. I know it's not set in concrete, but one of the things they mentioned was specifically all of the railroad tracks north of your downtown, they will not be going across them, they will be going over them. They specifically use the word flyover. What that means is you will not have a train going through town, you will have a train going over your town. That makes it very difficult to put a train station in your downtown if, in order to get over Holman Avenue, it has to approach much further south. Some of the other things I wanted to point out. I am one of these commuters that, according to this survey, would not be using the Hammond station anymore. I would, in theory, be using this new line. I rode the South Shore twice last week. I spent a total of about $75 in your city that I would not have otherwise spent if I rode the other train. According to one of the surveys, at least half of the new ridership, 3,000 people, currently ride out of the East Chicago or Hammond Station, those people would no longer be coming through your city to be spending money. And again, tonight, Congressman Viscoski came to you asking for 1/3 of your seated money, and I will point this out very clearly, 1/3 of your seated money for phase 1 of a 3-phase project. I'll say that again, 1/3 of your money for phase 1 of a 3-phase project. I don't think I need to spell out the rest. Unless they plan on having this train take 100 years, he will be back again in 5 years asking for another 1/3 and another 1/3. Thank you.
Mr. Joe McCarthy.
Joe McCarthy, 3722 Grover Avenue. My wife is she works downtown Chicago. She uses the South Shore. But like anything else that the government puts before you, it comes with strings attached. And the gentleman was absolutely right. 1/3 for a third of the project just doesn't make economic sense, especially since you didn't ask the questions. And I realize you were being polite, but you should have put them on the spot and said, what about, Councilman, you did ask about urban development, which he really didn't talk about. Listen to what he said. He said a whole lot of nothing. But you have people from Washington that are going into Geary. They're going to devise this urban renewal plan for Geary. And we're talking about South Shore moving passengers, freight, people, and the airport. And we're spending a ton of money, and we haven't seen anything just yet. But you know Geary is going to come out large. They need to, because they're going to have people from Washington there. Hammond is a work blue-collar area. We have done nothing since we filled up whatever enterprise zones we have now, but on Marble Street, Jack, that's a heck of a piece of property located right around that South Shore spur. And petitioning the federal government for an enterprise zone would be great there, because if we're talking about devising a plan, you should have devised a plan and implemented the rail spur and talk about utilizing the resources that are coming out of Washington, going to be in Geary, to devise something that's going to benefit Hammond. Then one of the questions that I would have asked the congressman point blank instead of him having his way with this, and I realize you were being polite, but he really didn't answer any of your questions. You came the closest to actually asking him about an urban plan, and I appreciate that, Councilman. Because my wife works downtown Chicago and I work for the city of Hammond, we were able to put my first son through college at cost. We paid his full freight and he's zero in debt. College Bound helped my daughter get a bachelor's degree too, but here's the catch with the College Bound is that there's no anchor in the city of Hammond to keep those college bound kids in Hammond or in Lake County. They could possibly go south. So what we need is an urban development plan. We need to maintain eliminate the brain drain from the region by attracting those people to this area. Congressman did talk about the Purdue University spur and the economic development that will come from there, but you need to branch out from that. And I haven't seen a plan yet, and I haven't heard anyone talk about what's the plan before the spur instead of phase 1 at 800,000 of 1/3 of phase 2, phase 3. And like the gentleman said, in 3-4 years from now, that's going to happen because we're finding that out with the E911. All of a sudden, there's huge overcost. So whenever the government does ask for a dime, you better grab $1.50. And that's the position that this city is. And Councilman, you said it right. Our budget was cut simply just to make do with what we got. And the county option income tax, what we thought was going to balance out is not going to balance out. It's already being utilized, and they're reaching for more. So urban development, an economic plan, utilizing what Washington is going to be putting into Geary, devising or developing that property. I think that's the way you wanted to go before you talk about a South Shore expansion. And this council sets the agenda as far as that goes. So it's all in your hands. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy.
Good evening, Council. I am here on behalf of 125 Hammond residents. We at the emergency.
State your name and address, please.
Matt Glaris, on behalf of 125 Hammond residents, we had a petition done to see people in support of the extension. We have 887 signatures. Of that 887, we had 125 from Hammond. It was the greatest number of people out of all the different communities in support of it. We also have here for submission to the council as well support from all the universities in Northwest Indiana, including.
Again, sir, I need your address where you live.
I do not live in Hammond. I am
What's your
here-
address?
447 Surrey Hill Lane, Valparaiso, Indiana.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sorry. We are here with the submissions of the letters from all the different universities on behalf of support for the extension of the South Shore, including Purdue Calumet, and all of the reasons in which they believe that the expansion is a good thing for the areas. As well as we have support from all the from the healthcare providers too, all the hospitals, including Franciscan and Hammond. They're all in support of the economic development that the train can bring. I can't answer to the people's concerns about financing. I can just tell you that the people we've talked to and the people that these people represent do represent people who live, work, and play in Hammond. And they do, in some cases, support this. So what we'd like to do is submit this for the council's review, and thank you.
Thank you. Nick.
My name is Mary Kay Kaminsky. My address is 517 Lewis Street in Hammond. I am speaking about the South Shore extension. I am against it. My mom and I, we live basically a block from where the extension is going to come down. So does my sister. This guy before us, support of it, really? What, I mean, what's Valparaiso, okay? Really? He don't understand that this is only going to be a block from some of us. Some people closer. You know, please, you know, don't support this. Vote against supporting this, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
William O'Connor, 5268 Holman. I think it used to be City Hall some time ago. I've been speaking to opponents of the South Shore project a lot the last 7 or 10 days. And there's a common thread. When I ask, I've heard your criticisms, what is your positive alternative for growth in Hammond in the county? And no one has one. We live in a drowning city, and you know it. And you people can choose to sit on the sidelines and watch this city go under, or you can take a bold move in an attempt to save it. And if you don't believe me, ask one of these opponents to come up with an idea themselves. I'm a solution finder. I'm not a problem finder. And a couple other points. I work in downtown Hammond, which has become a boulevard of empty buildings. From Russell Street north, I think there are 12 of them. But instead of lament, oh, woe is me, or everything's moving south, I look to this council. In the state of New York, the state legislature got together a few months ago and they passed a law, any new business that buys property, 10-year tax abatement. It's working wonderfully well. Look at that or something like that, but for God's sakes, do something. We're going to be a ghost town in downtown Hammond in a couple years. Finally, about getting people to come to Hammond, let's get real here. Our schools just got their grades. 15 of 20 got D's and F's. No one is coming to this city as long as that's the performance. And as long as you people tolerate it and don't get on the ball and forget the political consequences or flack and do what's right for the city. Nice seeing you guys again.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Next speaker, Mary Ellen Kaminsky. Slazak.
Mary Ellen Slasik, 517 Lewis. Somebody from Valparaiso is going to have a train track down the street from their house like I might, and my middle daughter Elizabeth might. And even my mom lives in Munster. If she's still around when that thing's built, it'd be down the street from her. And I'm talking really, really close. This is a waste of money. Hammond's got problems. The South Shore extension is going to do nothing but create more. People are going to lose peace in their neighborhoods, and we're going to lose a lot of tax money that could be used elsewhere in Hammond. And as you all know, as residents of Hammond, we need a lot of work over here, an awful lot. And not just a civil city, a school city too. I'm glad Mr. O'Connor brought that up. There was only one school in Hammond that got an A, and that was Lafayette Elementary, which I'm really glad they pulled themselves up. But we need to think of a good idea, maybe think outside the box, to bring something to Hammond that is going to help, and the South Shore is not. Look at where the South Shore Station is now in North Hammond. You see a lot of development there? No. You see a lot of vacant, abandoned, nasty-looking buildings that look like they need to be pulled down with a bulldozer. The economic boon is just not there. And all this South Shore extension is going to do is subsidize those who have decided to live far away from here. I have got a family member that used to live in Hammond, then he moved out to Highland, then he moved out to Lake of the Four Seasons, and he takes the South Shore, he jumps it over at Miller and takes it to Chicago to his job. But why should we subsidize these people that chose to live so far away from their jobs? If they could afford to live out there, let them figure out their own transportation. I don't want my tax dollars being used for that. That's a very unwise use of our tax dollars. Why should we take care of those people who live out there? We got to take care of what we have here. This is the priority. Thank you.
Thank you.
George Sawyer, Robertsdale. I think the train's a luxury item. It'd be nice if we had it. I mean, who wouldn't want it? You know, it's a great aesthetic thing, I guess, but in terms of this economic boom, this idea of if you build it, they will come, that's a red herring. If they're going to come because the Illinois tax structure is so out of whack. They're going to run, and they're going to get over here and hopefully get some shelter from the exorbitant taxes that are taking place in Chicago and Illinois. But that's, you know, I mean, it's always good to hear the congressman speak because he's smooth, he's good. And, you know, he's almost got you persuaded, but then you realize it's all rhetoric. And, you know, like Councilman Kowinski asked some good, solid questions. So did Councilman Emerson and some others. I mean, I'm just saying those two stuck out the most with me, but we need, you know, everything's done in anticipation. And not one word about risk. There's a deep element of risk here. Like they've said in different forums, social media and the radio, what if you build it and it's a dud? You can't go ripping it up and make a bike path out of it. Ain't gonna happen. So anyway, and the last idea on this is this whole idea of 27 years that this project has been out in the circulating somehow in the region. That is just, I don't know how to, that's a distortion. You know, you can count on your hand, one hand, how many times this train has come up. Yeah, Janet Moran may have enacted some set-asides back in the day, but this thing is not, it's only come on the burner when that 1.5 tax came in. That's why the timing's there. That's why it's now. They want to get at that money before we do. And that thing was passed to help municipalities get out of the 10, remember, we were without this tax, without this extra funds for 10 hard years. They froze our levy. That was some bad days. And now we're just starting to maybe get some relief. Whoa, he wants to come in and grab it. No, don't be taken in by that. That's all I got to say about the train because everybody else has probably got something better to say. But anyway, what I'm really disturbed about is this idea of we have a bona fide contract. The city has a bona fide contract with firefighters. That's a binding agreement. I don't know that this council has has the authority to redo that contract. I don't even know if the mayor has a contract as a contract. I think that's an executive function. While you guys can determine the budget, the contract is a separate thing. And I find it really disturbing that Ed Lomelli would initiate this clawback type of strategy. Okay, I'll sign it, but then we're going to claw back and get all that stuff back. Bull. That thing was negotiated at arm's length with mature representatives of the fight. We saw it right there in that caucus room. And it was the mayor's liberality that those guys would have been relegated to being just regular city employees. And the mayor opened them up and said, okay, we'll have one more shot at it. And there's something just wrong about that. You're going down a path of chaos. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Toya. Last speaker of the evening will be Mr. Alvin Cheeks.
Guys to the 4th annual Hammond Open Chess Tournament. This year is the 4th year for it. With the help of this council, the mayor, the Hammond City Clerk is for us into a really great activity. The event goes international in terms of the coverage that it gets and the players that it gets. Even one of the young men has played 2 years in a row in Japan. We had one individual who went to college. No one else in his family had ever seen the inside of a college, so it's been a great help to the city and a great help in getting those young people off of the street. And I'd just like to thank McDonald's and Sony for having another great event, and look forward to you guys coming out. The other thing that we have in is a large amount of gun shootouts in the 3rd District lately. So I would hope that this council and the mayor gets an ease on the new activity that's existing in our neighborhoods. Those gentlemen that are having these major shootouts are pretty young guys, so I would hope that, we find a medium to the tension that's all of a sudden existing and the new people migrating in over the winter. It's getting pretty crazy, so thank you.
And by Councilwoman Venez. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.